everyone, and good evening to all of you. Good afternoon and good morning. My name is One Gets Bread, and again in my other streams where I've been playing Pokemon as well as the recorder, I've been mentioning that I've switched locations for filming when I'm doing the recorder practice because my sister and my dad have recently tested positive for Omicron, so this whole week we've been quarantining and isolating. So I moved to my room most of the day, so I had to move everything over here. So I've been just isolating and quarantining um, along with the rest of my family. So I had to move from the basement to my room. So actually, it was 5 days on Friday, but we're just doing it over the weekend just to be safe. You can never be too careful with this pandemic going on, and especially if some of our family members have sadly tested positive for it. But my sister is recovering, and so is my dad, which is good. And so, yeah, just for this late afternoon, I'm looking at the Bach pieces for the recorder. Now, this is an alto recorder. It's deeper than the soprano that many people are familiar with in grade school. And what's special about the alto recorder is it's actually featured in some of Johann Sebastian Bach's concertos, specifically the Brandenburg concertos, which are famous for being like kind of his resume. He handed it to the Margrave of Brandenburg to get employed. And there's six of them. The third is the most famous. This is the that they play all the time in concerts. But the second Brandenburg, as well as the fourth Brandenburg, actually feature the alto recorder as a solo instrument. And so what I was playing earlier was actually the third movement of Brandenburg Concerto 4, which actually features two recorders. And Bach calls these recorders in his score, the original manuscript where he wrote down the parts of the instruments, he calls them the flauti di echo. And it's kind of a little bit of a mystery, what did he actually mean by flauti di echo, which translates to echo flute. Did he mean for two performers to stand on the side of the concert when they're playing this piece? Or was he talking about the alto recorder in G? Well, I like to believe it's the alto recorder in G because there's an impossible note where you'll have to cover the bottom of the instrument with your knee in some of the runs, or it could have been just the alto recorder in F. The alto recorder in F is used in the second Brandenburg as well. It's one of the solo instruments along with the oboe, the violin, and the trumpet. So, an interesting fact about the Brandenburg Concerto 4 is that a few measures in the first and the third movement, we have this big old violin cadenza, so that's pretty interesting. And of course, the other famous Brandenburg is the fifth one, which has the first piano concerto part where the keyboard is actually the solo instrument. That at the time it was a harpsichord. So there's a lot of history and interesting parts in all the Brandenburg concertos, and I encourage all of you to look up on Google or YouTube various recordings and performances of the Brandenburg concertos, especially the second and the fourth one, which feature the recorder. Right, I am going to go back to the fourth Brandenburg concerto. I'm just going to run through the third movement, maybe the second movement again. And let me just get to the page. There we go. And the third movement in the Brandenburg Concerto number 4 consists of this fugue on this simple melody. So you hear that throughout the different voices in the different instruments. It starts first in the violas, then it goes into the second violins, and then it goes to the violins, and then sometimes the celli have it, sometimes the harpsichord, the continuo has it, and then we go to the recorders. And all this time, it's the same melody and different plays off of it, just in different modes, just in different key signatures. And so 22 measures in this fugue. A fugue again is when a subject is translated in different keys, and there's a whole kind of like pattern. There's a whole like art to writing fugues, but basically you're taking a melody and translating to different versions of it. they're across different voices. So 22 measures in is when the recorders actually come in, and they're in unison. Now, in Brandenburg 4, the recorders are part of a team. They're usually playing together. Sometimes the recorders will have like a little spotlight section where it's just their section playing. And usually the first recorder, of course, will take the spotlight there. But in the third movement, they're usually working as a team. They're playing in unison, and then they're playing off of each other again because it's like a fugue, but it's as if they're one voice. So you'll see some different interplay if you look at a recording of one. I recommend the what's the guy's name? Maurice Steger version of Brandenburg 4. It's very interesting. The recorder players are very energetic. They're like dancing on the stage and stuff. But yeah, so if I was playing with a recording or something, which I won't do because I don't want to get DCMA'd, but you'll hear the different voices come in with the same melody, just different plays off of it. All right, I'm going to just start at the top and then just bounce around and play through Brandenburg 4's third movement. All right, that run there, I made one note mistake in the pattern, but other than that, it's just this rapid. So it kind of like rises and then it falls back again, which I find a little bit interesting and challenging as well. And I'll just go through it again. Made the same mistake again. It's a B, not an A. That's actually a little bit faster than what I've been taking it at. And if I play it too fast, I'm gonna pass out and run out of breath, especially if it gets into the higher areas. So I'm gonna take it a little bit slower just so it's easier and I don't pass out. Okay. So again, after that, we have these sustained notes that if you hear against the orchestra, the recorders are providing like a chord. These are chords, as the strings now have that fast but different notes and in different modes. And that whole part, the recorders are in unison. Now, after we end that, the violin has this cool arpeggiated like that. And that's when we get to see the recorders actually split off. You see the recorder 1 and the recorder 2 splitting off. So pretend there's a second recorder and they come in around dun 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 dun. So around there, that's when they come in. So Alright, so at those long sustained notes, again, this is the part of the concerto where, again, the recorders will split off to 1 and 2. And on the second recorder, they have the same thing, but they come in a little bit staggered from the first recorder. Now, at those sustained notes in the recorder 1 part, which I'm playing, they have this, the second recorder will have this so it's like this interplay where we're providing that top note while they're playing like this arpeggiated kind of run, trying to touch that top note like that, like that. So actually it would sound like this, because later on the recorder 1 has that run, and it's later in the concerto, and it's around measure 190. If anyone has the sheet music for this, it's measure 190, so it's around there. So 5 measures after measure 190. So that's like what the second recorder will have when we're going up here, when it's first played by the recorders only. So starting where I get on that high B, that's when we have the second recorder doing the it's very interesting. If you listen to a recording or watch a performance of Brandenburg 4 on YouTube, you'll see that multiple times around. Not just with the recorders, actually some other instruments when they're building up, especially at the beginning with the fugue, you'll see that happening as well. So I'm just going to continue on and jump here and there. Maybe I'll skip all those chords because you really need the other sounds of the orchestra to actually hear what's going on. So I'll just go through like the faster passages. All right, the next time we have something like the melody, the dun 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 dun. Next time we have something like that is when it's transposed into the key of D major. So this is also where that impossible note comes into play. So right in that first part, the dun 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 dun, the F sharp is the highest possible F sharp, but it's actually an impossible note because if I try to do a G, and you would logically think if you cover more holes, it'll go down. But so here's the top of G, so it's 1/2 step above that F sharp that we need. So you'll make this fingering, as you can see, and the back hole on the recorder right here is halfway covered. You'll have to blow pretty hard for that high G. But we need to lower it down a 1/2 step to hit that note in that fast passage. So how are we going to do that? You would think you cover more holes, and this depends on the instrument. This is just a Yamaha plastic recorder, so it might be different with more expensive instruments and whatnot. But for a Yamaha recorder, if you try to cover the holes while doing the highest G fingering, this is what it sounds like. You don't really get it. It's like a G, but it's kind of like a flat G. You want a G flat, not one that's not a G that's slightly flat, you know? And so what you're going to do on most recorders to get that high F sharp is use your knee and cover that bottom hole. So again, the run is did you hear that? There's this high note that was very brief, but it's as close as we could get to that F sharp. And anyways, that run is pretty fast, so it's like no one will notice anyway. So it's kind of like an illusion note, you know? All right, I'm going to speed it up slightly, and I'm going to go through that passage again. All right, that's just all chord building things, so we're just holding these notes that are descending. Yeah, like that. So then the next fast passage is when we land on this A, and then we go to a G, and then we go to the high G, and then we're trying to translate the main parts of the melody, all the voices. We're trying to get them into E minor for the violin solo. There's a violin solo that starts in E minor here, so that's why we're translating everything up to that point into E minor. That's what that there's an E flat here, and then it ends on an E. So let's see where that starts. Okay. As you could tell, this is the hardest part in the song for me, personally. Because I always want to add an extra note in between an E and a G. I want to add an F sharp, but that's incorrect, so I have to stop myself each time and try it over again. There we go. And then we just have more chord things. So we have these B's. All right. And then now we go into what's interesting. Right now we're going to go into B minor. So after 29 measures of this big old cadenza, the violin goes like 16th tuplets in these measures. There's like like that. So they're doing like these weird old wavy looking arpeggios very rapidly at the tempo. And then we go to this part, they're doing like these double stops, but they're not double stops because they're not playing two notes at the same time. They're using two strings at once. They're alternating, so they're like something like that. And so when we enter, so the violin will announce the dun 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 in E minor, and then we call in response and back in B minor. So let's go there. So again, we're just playing around the chords that are in B minor there. There will be other things going on with the other instruments, the strings, that are probably going to be more interesting. We're just doing more chord building, but this time we are using quarter notes instead of half notes and whole notes. Let me go back to that section. Oh, I forgot to cover my thing halfway. That's why it didn't go that high. Then again, it's just some chord building. These are more sustained notes. So again, the strings are going to cover in all those other whatever crazy old patterns they have. And actually, I'm going to play through them. It's a short section, and it has some cool accidentals. Alright, so right there, where I stopped, messed up, and then went backwards and played it through again, we hear that dun 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 dun, but now it's in C. So another key in this song that we have to switch to, and we're barely in G for a little bit again, and then we repeat the same main thing in G, and then we go into our C major. So I'm going to just play through that part again. Also to note, there's that's going to be that sounding melody and that pattern in the notes. That's going to be important at the end of this movement. So we're going to play through it and listen for that thing, but changed up a bit at the end of the movement. I'm going to go through that all again and try to play it better. Alright, so now we're solidified in C major. And then we have a dun 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 dun, like when we first came in with it. But again, we're just going to provide the sustained notes for the second recorder to do its dun 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 dun, but in C major. So going to go there now. And now we're at the point, I'm just skipping around here, so now we're at the part in the score where we actually have the first time that the second recorder has the da 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 dun 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 dun. Now it's in our part in the main key of G. Again, that's just chord building. I'm going to skip the entirety of it because it's a bunch of measures of it. But now, remember that melody up here, that same pattern that I was talking about? We might see it later in the concerto, where at the end, and now we have it a few times. So I'm going to go back and play the first time we see it. So it's da da dun da da dun dun. So there's emphasis on that second note in that second phrase. So pay attention for that as we get to the bottom of this page and then finish off this movement. Did you hear it? It goes dun da dun da da dun da da dun da da dun. So that da da dun that takes place of that second emphasis, still giving emphasis on that part of the phrase, but it's in a different pattern. And we're going until we get to the end of this concerto. So I'm going to go back there. Actually, I kind of memorized it. I don't need to flip the page again. Alright, so we made it to the end. Just a few more things I wanted to turn the attention to. Okay, so we had, again, we went back to our C major statement of the main subject. Right there. So those two G's. So again, two G's. I'm going to add emphasis on the second one. Now, in all the recordings I've seen so far, they do the same thing. They kind of slow down at that dun, dun, da da dun, da da dun, dun, da da dun, da da dun, dun, da da 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 dun. They kind of slow down at that part, emphasizing that second half note as they go. So we're going to do that too, but I have a little thing that it reminds me of. So Seth Meyers is a late night talk show host, and he does his thing when he's going over the news or telling his monologues on the show. He does these callbacks, or he'll say a joke like at the beginning of the show, and then later on, maybe when he's going over the news in depth and is a closer look segment, he'll do a callback. So he takes that joke and then he somehow adds it into his his information that he's telling in the news or with the person that he's interviewing. So he calls that a callback, and it's pretty hilarious whenever he pulls it off correctly. So around there, I like to imagine it's a callback. So or it's the audience, like they're anticipating, okay, I know that the comedian's going to say callback joke here. I'm laughing so much because he's so funny, or he or she is so funny, and so it's like they're interrupting the comedian, but not in a mean-spirited way. They're just laughing so much that because his previous joke was so funny, they know he's going to go back to it, so they're like laughing into anticipation. So that's like that. Ha ha da da dun da da dun ha da da dun da da dun da da dun da da dun da da dun. That's what it reminds me of. So I'm going to go back there and try to emphasize, really put some weight against those second half notes to give it more emphasis. Then we're now at square one, and we've made it through the concerto with these last couple of bars. Alrighty, that was the third movement. Now let's backtrack and go to the second movement. Now the second movement is kind of a call and response type deal because we will be playing this echoing effect. Now this is where the echoing effect is also seen a lot in this concerto. And how it happens in this movement in particular is this call and response type of deal. So the string orchestra will have this da na 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 na, right? And then they'll cut off, and then it'll just be the violin and the two recorders. The soloist, the violin is going to pretend to be a bass instrument and provide the lower notes that the cello, the double bass, bassoon, and harpsichord would be playing because they're in the continuo. But then we're going to switch, we're going to squeeze all the other parts out. Just worry about the bass line, give that to the violin. And then the recorders are going to do this call and response. It's kind of like piano and forte. Well, you could alternate, right? So it's going to be forte at the first statement of it, then it's going to be piano, just because of the recorders, kind of a quiet instrument, unless you're doing like one of those bad, dank meme flute covers of a song like, you know, one of those ones that you see on YouTube all the time for all the memes. But other than that, the recorder is a very subtle instrument. It's a very like warm, liquid sounding voice that it isn't supposed to be piercing, but you can make it piercing. Of course, there's some parts where you need to come out a bit, but in this one especially, just think of like a mist looming around a mansion or in the woods, like a nice, I'd say like midday fog or something, you know, overcast sky, and maybe all the animals are out. Maybe those are like birds just walking around on the forest floor. The da 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 da. They're very solemn because they're just looking for food, so they're all just walking around. Then the recorders and the violin are kind of like this, I don't want to say scary fog rolling in, but you know, like just a calm, um, soothing fog. There we go. So it has that echoing effect. It's like echoing in the mountain woods somewhere. All right, so I'm just going to play through it, and again, we would have a recording, and I'd be playing through it along with the recording, but I don't want to get DCMA'd or copyrighted, so I'm just going to play through the part. It starts on this E, so it's an E minor, so I'll just start it off. Usually it's the other instruments, it's the basso continuo to have that E to start us off in this movement, but I'll just play it. Alright, so since it is a call and response and the second time is for the soloist, I would usually add like some trill or some ornamentation, even though it's not written in, every time we do that call and response thing. So I'll repeat again from the beginning. Oh, man, I think I was very out of tune for that A flat, so let me go back to that area and try to fix that note up. So we finished the first phrase of the melody, and at those descending notes where we're changing every time by an accidental, the second recorder has this dun 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 dun, something like that. So descending line, and the violin is actually mirroring the alto recorder one part. So or playing that along with a solo violin. And again, it's just this flowing, you know, kind of calming, but still foggy, and it's still like overcast in the sky, but it's still a soothing scene. It's just a little bit in a minor key because of how the Italian concerto is structured, as well as how it's in the key of E minor. So it sounds a little bit gloomy, but G major is a brighter key than something like B flat, so um, E minor is still going to sound a bit bright. You know, it's not too spooky. The fog isn't that spooky. It's actually kind of calming and soothing. All right, so we're going to go into the second phase, and I'm just going to. The last thing I'm going to say, maybe until we get to some of the solo parts, is there's a high section in this next part. So we're going to go into like D minor, then we're going to change in a few keys, and then we're going to end into A minor. So that's where the solo is. So I'm just going to be quiet and actually play through all of that as much as I can without stopping to talk. Alrighty. So right there, we have our two solo runs only seen in the alto recorder one. So we need to go back there again because I kind of blew through those and didn't really express him enough. So we're going to go back there. So we just landed in B minor now. So right there, we went into A minor, and then we had these E's to hold out. So that was that long note where I was trying to like just mess around. And actually, that's the first time I've held through all of those 4 bars. So I didn't pass out this time. I wasn't in the danger of passing out this time. I actually was able to conserve my breath to hold that out for those 4 measures. So, and we just land in this. That area, it's like an F natural, which isn't in the key. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I'm having a brain fart. So it isn't in the key, and it just kind of draws attention. Like, hey, we're approaching the end. Get ready for the alto recorder solo run. This is the last solo run of the movement in the concerto, and you'll know where we get to it. So it's coming up, so please listen out for it. So after that, we get to this descending da 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 so after that, that's when we'll have our alto recorder solo. So I'm going to go through that descending line again. This is where all the strings are doing some weird things in the chord, and I think the second alto recorder actually has like the melody. They have the dun 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 dun, but then starting in B minor and going all the way down to E minor. So, alrighty. Alrighty, that was the end of the second movement of Brandenburg Concerto 4. As you could tell, I'm going to flip away my music. As you can see at the bottom there's that big old run that starts on a B, the lower B, and we hit that E, and then we just do this cool chromatic at the end of it. So, again, that part, there'd be a fermata at the note before those two measures, so the orchestra will hold, they'll cut off, and then the alto recorder 1 will go. So you could take it at whatever tempo you want. It's a solo for the alto recorder, so I like to kind of mess around the tempo a bit there. As you can see, I started descending slowly, and then while descending from that, ascending slowly, sorry about that. Descending, I started a little bit fast, so there's like dun 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 like that. So I kind of had like a little speed up right here, and I think that draws attention to that high E at the top of that run. And then I'll just slow down until I get to the. I like to imagine that it's a quarter note that's on the E flat, and it has trill over it instead of 16th notes that are trilling back and forth, because I like to imagine that there's a fermata over that too, so you could add this like weird, mysterious, and then just crawl down or just fade away, you know? That. And then there's a rest, and then everyone comes back in for these two chords. So it's just not me playing, it'd be the other instruments in whatever recording I'm playing along with. It ends on this. I can't tell from the sound of all the instruments. It's either in E. It's either in. I think it's in B major. I think we end in B major, so that B. We're playing in B major. That's the last measure. And yeah, so that's two of the three measures of Brandenburg Concerto 4. I'm still working on the first measure. It has a bunch of these weird. Alright, so there's just a lot of fast runs in the first movement that I'm still working on. As you can see, I kind of messed up on the fingering. But yeah, those are very interesting the piece, please go and look up a recording of Brandenburg Concerto 4 on YouTube. It's a very interesting piece. I think you'll like how all the parts and the recorders dance about and the different sounds you could hear bouncing off of the orchestra. I think it's a very cool concerto. And yeah, so we played through the third movement and then we did the second, and we stopped and studied some of the phrases a little bit closely and stuff like that. So yeah, that's practicing Bach's music on the recorder. Hope you enjoyed this live stream of me practicing. If you're interested, please drop a follow to my Twitch channel. I have some Pokemon streams, but I also do music, especially the recorder stuff, and I also have my past streams where I have a lot of other music streams on there, my past streams. And you can find them on YouTube. My channel is One Who Got Spread, so if you're interested, please go and check it out and drop a follow there as well. Alright guys, thank you so much for joining me on this recorder practice. I hope everyone's doing well, staying safe. Please get vaccinated and do something nice for someone. And don't ever stop making music. Alright guys, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And yeah, I love you all. Thank you so much.